Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Pash On Podcast. Let's get started with your host, Brian Pash.
Hi, this is Brian Pash, and welcome to another podcast. On today's show, I want to talk about bounce rate, but specifically what happens when you see a large change in bounce rate metrics when you change website platforms. Now, let's do a little history. For many years, dealership website platforms did not directly support Google Analytics. And those who installed Google Analytics typically told the dealer to ignore that data because they had their own dashboard. Over the years, dealers and vendors have realized that Google Analytics is a great way to validate the performance claims in a website platform dashboard. But over the years, some things have changed in how vendors and dealers use Google Analytics, which has a big impact on bounce rate. You've heard me say this once, twice, maybe 50 times, that I think bounce rate is a worthless metric, yet so many 20 groups, so many dealers are obsessed with this metric and not tracking what consumers are doing on the website. So let's start with the basics and then move through the solution to a problem that concerns many dealers, but after today, you're going to find out it's really not a problem at all. So when you install Google Analytics in its basic form out of the box, if the website company is not tracking consumer engagement and sending those click actions or scroll actions as events into Google Analytics, bounce rate is defined as did the consumer visit another page. So if somebody comes to your website and only visits one page and leaves, if events or consumer engagement actions are not being logged into Google Analytics, bounce rate is simply how many people only viewed one page. Because bounce rate is calculated as the time between two events. So if somebody comes to the website, Google sees that as an event. Okay, a new visitor. So if the website isn't throwing any events for page scrolling, looking at photos, clicking on buttons, whatever, then if the person leaves, Google would say they bounced. And of course, this is somewhat misleading because, for example, LotLinks uses artificial intelligence to display ads to low funnel in-market shoppers and takes those clicks to a VDP. Other ad tech, from CDK or Dealer.com or Dealer Inspire do similar ways to determine likely buyers and, send them to a page that their algorithms think is appropriate. So imagine if somebody goes to a VDP, looks at 10 photos, downloads the Carfax report, plays around with the payment calculator, and leaves. That would be a bounce if the website company was not tracking click actions in Google Analytics. Now, a few years ago, there was a website company, which I will not call out by name, but was calling up dealers and saying, your bounce rate is horrible. Your bounce rate is 40% or 50%, and our websites have a bounce rate of 2%. Now, of course, some of my colleagues like Tim Martell quickly called bullshit on that because it's impossible for a website truly to have a 2 or 3% bounce rate. Why? Well, because consumers come to dealers' websites and do nothing. It may be 20 or 25% of the traffic can come right to the homepage, do nothing and leave because maybe they were just confirming the phone number or the address or their hours of operation. So this one company was showing dealers, look, our websites have a 2, 3, 4% bounce rate. And the way they were accomplishing that is by throwing events automatically when a consumer visited the dealer's website. Meaning, you can throw an event if someone's on your website 5 seconds. You can throw an event if they click or scroll or whatever you want to track, even if it's not consumer directed. Meaning, you could throw an event in Google Analytics when a certain overlay is displayed on the home page, when a certain module is loaded. Oh yeah. And when you do that, the reason why bounce is so low is because bounce is calculated as the time between two events. And if there's not two events recorded in Google Analytics, it says it's a bounce. So when you throw events into GA, the bounce rate will automatically significantly lower. That's right. Just by tracking events. A dealer called me up the other day and they were concerned. They said, our bounce rate used to be 15% and now it's 30 or 35%. And I said, okay, what happened? Well, we changed website providers. I said, okay, let me look at your Google Analytics account. And here's what was happening. The previous website company was throwing events when pieces of their own software loaded. They were doing it not to jack up analytics bounce rate. Their engineers were using it to track what's happening on a page, how long things take to load. And so when I looked at the previous website company, listen, 85% of every visitor had an event, which is practically impossible unless those events are being fired by the website themselves. And then I looked at the new website platform, and they were also tracking events, but listen, they were only tracking events based on a consumer's click action, which I think is the more appropriate use of events. So having a 2% bounce rate is just ridiculous. Having a 10 to 15% bounce rate is nearly impossible because the number of people who either are misdirected to a dealer's website or just come to the home page, get what they need and leave. So when you are tracking events, did they scroll? Did they click on a photo? Did they play a video? Did they click on a Get ePrice button? When you track consumer engagement in Google Analytics, bounce rate will drop. Typically, it will drop in half. We have a metric in the PCG specification for Google Analytics called ZEP. It stands for zero engagements per page. That means what percentage of the traffic got no engagement points from our tracking software that we set up in Google Tag Manager. It's an open spec. Anybody can install it. Guess what? Organic traffic is probably the purest traffic that comes to a dealer's website. Typically, that traffic is using the dealer's name or brand and city to get to the dealer's website. And guess what? As a national average, the ZEP on organic traffic is between 20 and 25%. Let me say that again. Organic traffic, which is the highest converting traffic, the most valuable annuity of high quality traffic to a dealer's website, 20 to 25% of those people will come to the website and do nothing. So when someone says, what is an appropriate bounce rate when event tracking is in place? Well, it's probably in that 25 to 35% range. And it can be slightly lower, but it's surely not 10 or 15%, and it's absolutely not 2%. It really depends on how the website is configured. That's why bounce rate discussions in a 20 group are so meaningless. Meaning, Dealer Inspire may be doing something that supports the PCG specification. Another website platform may ignore it, yet another one may be gaming the system and just throwing events to make their bounce rate look lower. So why would dealers compare apples to oranges? Well, it's because they thought bounce rate was a consistent metric. They thought that Google Analytics bounce rate was using the same measurement tools, but it's not the case. If you don't have events being fired and you're only waiting for consumers to move from page to page, then the bounce rate will be high. If you start tracking what consumers do on the page, every time you send an event to Google Analytics, that time allocation is incremented for your total time on site and the bounce rate is 0. So I hope this gives everyone listening some clarity. If your website platform during a change sees an increase in bounce rate or a major decrease in bounce rate, it is most likely not a function of true engagement or performance. If all other factors, meaning your agency, is still the same, it's very likely, I would say a 9 out of 10 chance, that it's just the way the two website platforms locked in event tracking in Google Analytics. You know, this is such a timely topic because in June 11th and 12th, I'm doing a 2-day Google Analytics course for dealers and members of the automotive community. Those are product managers and customer support managers and technical support teams. 2 days in New Jersey. June's a beautiful time to visit the Garden State. And I ran this course in West Palm in January and I got rave reviews. So I'm doing it again, and I probably won't do it again this year. So this is a great opportunity. If you want to get serious about your website data, if you want to get serious about your marketing data, if you want to increase your return on ad spend, if you want to sell more cars with the existing budget you have to make sure Google Analytics is set up properly and that you're using the right metrics to see if the traffic you're paying for is truly engaged. I really don't care how many pages people visit. I don't really care about time on site. I don't care about click-through rate or cost per click. What I am tracking for dealers who are significantly outperforming their peers is how engaged is the traffic that's coming to the website. How strongly are those conversion metrics? There's some benchmarks for those. And how do we use engagement tracking to improve marketing strategy and targeting and landing pages? I'm going to discuss that all at the class, the Google Analytics class on June 11th and 12th. If you want to sign up, just go to pcgtraining.com and you'll see all the details for this great 2-day event. So I hope today's podcast clears the air. Bounce rate is a meaningless metric. There's no standards for it. But if you get caught in a conversation about huge changes in bounce rate, it's only likely to be a difference of how consumer events or software events are being thrown into Google Analytics. Thank you so much for your time today. I look forward to encouraging you and challenging you in an upcoming podcast.